Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the Senate Finance Committee. And we will open the meeting this morning and start with roll call, please.
Senator Dennis. Senator Kiekefer.
Here.
Senator Goycochea. Senator Hammond.
Here.
Senator Ratty.
Here.
Senator Sievers-Gansert.
Here.
Senator Canizaro.
Here.
Senator Dondero Loop.
Here.
Chair Brooks.
Here. Thank you. We have one thing on the agenda, two things on the agenda this morning, and one is to hear Senate Bill 377. The other will be public comment at the end of this meeting. And always and the public can always call in on the information provided, the number and information provided on the agenda that's posted on the legislative website, or you can go to Nellis on the legislative website, and there's a banner that you can click, and it will walk you through how to register and sign in for public comment after we hear the bill. I'd like to remind everyone to keep their microphone muted and their camera on and until you're ready to speak. And with that, we can get started with the bill presentation. We have Senator James Orenshaw here to help present Senate Bill number 377 from the Committee on Health and Human Services. That's done on behalf of the Legislative Committee on Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice, which Senator Orenshaw was on over the interim. And this deals with revises provisions relating to the Adoption Assistance Program. Senator Orenshaw, go right ahead.
Good morning, Chair Brooks, members of the Senate Finance Committee. For the record, James Orenshaw, I represent State Senate District 21. That's parts of Henderson and unincorporated Clark County. During the interim, I was chair of the Interim Committee on Child Welfare and Juvenile Justice, and we were able to have 6 meetings, 2 in-person meetings before the pandemic, and then after the pandemic struck, we were able to have 4 virtual meetings and finish our business. We did recommend 10 bill draft requests, and I believe that almost all of our votes were unanimous and bipartisan. We were able to come to consensus on most of the issues that we faced. I had tremendous assistance from Patrick Guinan and Julianne King of the Research Division and the great staff at the Legal Division, Ms. O'Grady, and we were able to get a lot of work done. And Senate Bill 377 is one of our recommendations that took the form of a bill. This morning, Chair Brooks, I am also joined by Jessica Rowe, who will help present with the bill, as well as Ross Armstrong and Mandy Davis. Mandy Davis has proposed a friendly amendment, and for some reason I don't think it showed up on Nellis this morning, and I apologize for any glitch there because I thought it had been submitted, but if it hasn't, I'm in the process right now of trying to make sure that that amendment for Mandy Davis is submitted to the committee. Very briefly, in order to comply with the provisions of the Federal Fostering Connections to Success and Increasing Adoptions Act of 2008, Senate Bill 377 provides that any grant money remaining in the adoption savings account at the end of the fiscal year that is identified as money saved pursuant to calculations prescribed by federal law would no longer revert to the state general fund, but would be carried forward into the next fiscal year for use by DCFS on expenses related to providing child welfare services generally. Additionally, if money that was carried forward for 1 year remains at the end of that year, then it would revert back to the general fund under this legislation. With your permission, Chair Brooks, I'd like to turn it over to Jessica Rowe, and then to Ross Armstrong, and then Mandy Davis. And if there are any questions the committee has, I'm happy to answer any questions. And we do have someone else who'd like to speak to the bill. County Commissioner Justin Jones, I believe, is also either on the phone or on Zoom. But with your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Jessica Rowe, Chair Brooks.
Senator Orenshaw, before we get started with that, we do have an amendment that was submitted, and it came from the Department of Health and Human Services, dated April 1st. Is that the amendment that you're speaking of?
Yes, Chair, that's the amendment Ms. Davis submitted, and for some reason, we couldn't find it on Nellis, but if you have it, then that's, sounds like it got to the right place.
And it is on the committee page, the committee meeting page for today's committee meeting, even if you don't see it on the bill page itself. So that we do have that on there.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. With your permission, I'd like to turn it over to Jessica Rowe.
Good morning, Ms. Rowe. Go right ahead.
Hi, good morning. For the record, my name is Jessica Rowe. It's Jessica. Last name is Rowe, Roe. I will begin to share. I have a presentation, so let me just set this up real quick for you. Okay. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Jessica Rowe. I'm the Vice President of Programs here in Nevada for Raise the Future. And I'm honored to have this opportunity to speak with you about our organization and more specifically the implementation of the Wendy's Wonderful Kids model through our partnership with state and local governments. Let's see here. In Nevada, on average, around 200 youth emancipate from foster care every year, and national data tells us that these youth do not do well. As you can see on this slide, youth who do not have someone by their side face an uphill battle full of obstacles and challenges. These outcomes are not what any of us want for our youth. Additionally, the coronavirus pandemic has reminded us all of the power and the need for human connections. In this time of social distancing, where kids in foster care are already at a disadvantage, we know that it is even more important to get foster youth connected and to do it with a sense of urgency. At Raise the Future, we believe that every young person deserves to go through life knowing they have a caring adult by their side. We connect youth waiting in foster care with the adults who become stable forces in their lives, and then we support those relationships so they last a lifetime. We raise the bar by providing exceptional evidence-based programs that aim to connect our youth with a caring adult so that they can successfully navigate life's challenges. We know that the social safety net needs to be strengthened for youth in foster care, and we are so excited that we've been able to partner with the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption to bring a program to Nevada that will do just that. We know that for many youth in foster care, general recruitment is not as effective. These youth need the specialized, child-focused recruitment efforts of an evidence-based program like Wendy's Wonderful Kids. In January of 2019, Nevada leaders met with leaders from the Colorado Department of Human Services and heard about the success that Colorado was having using the WWK program to find permanents for their longest waiting youth in care. The Nevada leaders determined that a priority should be put on funding this service so that similar results could be achieved for Nevada's older youth. Implementation of the WWK child-focused recruitment model is due to a public-private partnership with Clark County DFS, Nevada DCFS, DTFA, and Raise the Future. There are about 200 youth in Nevada who could be served by this program, and these youth are the hardest to place, the longest waiting, and many have given up the idea that legal permanence could happen for them. For most of these youth, the Nevada child welfare staff had spent years trying to reunite them with their families of origin, and when that was not possible, they attempted to find another permanent placement for them. Many of these youth have been matched, placed, disrupted from multiple placements multiple times. Active implementation of this model began in July 2019 when funding for 9 recruiters was secured. Additional funding was secured for 3 recruiters, which means that this program serves all 3 Nevada jurisdictions with a staff of 12 recruiters and 3 managers. With 4 months remaining in this fiscal year, we have already served 200 youth with this model. We are actively serving 176 youth and have already witnessed 14 adoption finalizations from youth on our caseloads. Now, I'd like to tell you a story about a connection that we made for a youth served by this model. In November 2019, a 13-year-old youth was referred to our program. Liza had been in care since she was 8 years old and legally free since 9. Liza's team mentioned that she had a great relationship with a previous foster mother named Sarah, but this was not a potential adoptive home as there were concerns about others living in the home. The WWK recruiter reached out to Sarah, who stated that she was no longer in that same living situation as before, and the team was ultimately able to move forward, placing Liza in her home in March of 2020. Liza finalized her adoption later that fall. Without the WWK recruiter re-exploring this past relationship, the team would not have been aware that circumstances had changed and the safety concerns were resolved. We continue to successfully connect these hardest to place youth and help them achieve permanency through this program. As you can see, there are a variety of funding sources that we have been awarded to support this work and the implementation of the WWK program, with 10 of our staff funded through our VOCA award. We have been fortunate that the state and Clark County have identified funding for implementing this program, and we are appreciative of them, as well as DTFA, who has joined us to support this work and serve the most vulnerable youth in Nevada. Our biggest need is securing an ongoing, sustainable source of funding, which is what the reinvestment of adoption savings dollars could do. This funding would ensure uninterrupted service delivery for vulnerable youth who've experienced multiple placement disruptions as well as staff changes. This funding would ensure there is time to achieve permanence. It can take up to 2 years to achieve an adoption finalization. The youth we serve are the hardest to place, often the longest waiting, and it takes time for youth to build rapport with our WWK recruiters who are challenging them to think of permanence in a different way. This long-term funding would ensure the support that newly placed youth and their families deserve, that is vital to building their relationship and maintaining stability in their new home. Other states have used their federal adoption savings dollars successfully for these purposes. In summary, at Raise the Future, we are working to build permanent connections for Nevada's waiting youth in foster care by implementing the WWK model statewide. We serve all eligible waiting youth in Nevada with this program, no matter where they reside. Our work is being supported by funding from both our government partners in Nevada and our philanthropic partner, DTFA. It has the potential to dramatically change the life outcomes for Nevada's older youth in care by connecting them with one caring adult. Not only is this the ultimate social safety net for these vulnerable youth, but our work has the potential to provide Nevada with a real return on their financial investment as well. Thank you for your time today. I've truly appreciated the opportunity to present to you.
Thank you, Ms. Rowe, and I appreciate that presentation. Senator Orenshaw, did you have anyone else that you wanted to have present?
Chair Brooks, I know we've got Ross Armstrong and Mandy Davis who are here to help kind of explain, the bill and answer any more questions the committee has. I thought we had Clark County Commissioner Justin Jones, but that perhaps I'm in error on that. I've been told that he was either logged in or had called in and wanted to speak, but if you're not showing Commissioner Jones, and with your indulgence, if I could turn it over to Ross Armstrong and Mandy Davis.
Yes, sir. Mr. Armstrong, Ms. Davis, go right ahead.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. This is Ross Armstrong, Administrator of the Division of Child and Family Services. It was great to have Jessica talk about kind of the real world implications of this bill and kind of my government bureaucratic mind. This is really about coming into compliance with federal law. It helps us do those great things that Jessica talked about, but we need to get in compliance with federal law. And so with me, I have Mandy Davis, our Deputy Administrator over Administrative Services, which includes our fiscal services, to explain what that federal law is and how this bill seeks to get us in compliance.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Mandy Davis, Deputy Administrator for the Division of Child and Family Services. Just as a little history of how this federal law came about, currently monthly subsidies that are paid to adoptive families who adopt children out of the foster care system are paid with a portion of federal Title IV-E funds, and then the remaining portion is paid with state general funds. Since 2010, the age at which children are adopted out of the foster care system become eligible for those federal Title IV-E started at a really high age, at age 16. This was intended to incentivize those older children who are usually difficult to adopt out of the foster care system, to incentivize states to really push those adoptions for those more difficult children who are difficult to adopt out of the system. So it started at age 16. It's been steadily decreasing since then. As part of that federal requirement, since 2015, states have been required to reinvest those savings, the general fund savings that states were able to realize due to those decreasing ages that children then become eligible for the federal Title IV-E funds. As part of that federal law, the savings are required to be reinvested in specific activities in the child welfare system. All of the activities are aimed at reducing the time children spend in foster care and are able to find a permanent placement. Some of those activities include services that may be provided under existing federal child welfare programs, including enhanced community services for providers who assist families and children at risk of entering foster care. At least 30% of those funds must be spent on post-adoption services, post-guardianship services, and services to support positive permanent outcomes for children at risk of re-entering foster care. So it's aimed at providing support after the child has been adopted to those families to ensure that that permanent placement stays and provide those supports to those families. And then the final portion for that requirement is that adoption savings must be used to supplement, not supplant, any federal or non-federal funds used to provide any of those services. Nevada currently has a budgetary requirement that any surplus general funds must revert back to the state at the end of every state fiscal year. So this does not allow the division to reinvest those funds back into the adoption programs as required by that federal law. Now, as Ms. Rose said, Nevada's child welfare system is divided into 3 separate jurisdictions. Clark County and Washoe County each operate their own child welfare programs, while the Division of Child and Family Services provides oversight to the entire state and operates the child welfare programs in those remaining 15 urban or rural counties. State general funds are passed through to the urban counties through a granting mechanism through DCFS, while DCFS receives the funds for the rural child welfare program directly from the state. This bill would allow any money remaining from general funds awarded to Washoe and Clark County for their adoption assistance programs at the end of a fiscal year that are identified as savings pursuant to the calculation required by federal law to not revert back to the state general fund. Those savings would be carried forward to the next fiscal year for use by the agency for the cost of providing those child welfare services, as mentioned before, without restriction. Any such savings that are carried forward and are remaining at the end of that next fiscal year would then revert back to the general fund. This bill has no known fiscal impact. If this bill does not pass, the Division of Child and Family Services would continue to be at risk of the federal law, not complying with the federal law, and may be assessed a penalty due to non-compliance with that federal law. The current cumulative outstanding amount of savings that has not been reinvested since 2015, we estimate at over $4 million. And this will continue to grow without the division able to meet the federal requirements for that law. Although there's no known fiscal impact, a fiscal note has been submitted indicating that the amount of savings that would be expended based on projections of the savings that the division is able to calculate. Again, no additional general funds would be required to comply with this. The funds would come from savings identified in the prior year. As Senator Orenshaw had mentioned, a conceptual amendment has been submitted to allow the rural child welfare programs to also comply with the law. As the way the bill was originally submitted, it would only allow Clark and Washoe County to comply. So the amendment would just bring in the rural child welfare to be able to comply with the law. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And before I turn it over to the committee, I just had a question about the federal guidelines that are being referenced. So how long have we been doing it exactly the way we're doing it right now while those federal guidelines have been in place? You say there's a risk of us getting penalized by the feds for the way we currently do it, but that has not yet happened. Is that correct?
This is Administrator Armstrong. That is correct. We have not yet been penalized. As Ms. Davis said, the law has been in effect since 2015. In the recent Family First Prevention Services Act bill that passed that changes the other end of the system, it was clear that Congress was concerned that the federal Health and Human Services agencies weren't doing enough to enforce this provision. And so we've been, they ordered a nationwide review of how this program is going, which to me is a prelude to enforcement action. And so we've been cooperating in interviews with the federal Office of Inspector General, with the Department of Health and Human Services about these funds for the last 6 months or so. So you're correct, there's been no enforcement action yet, although in taking a look at some federal movement now, I anticipate it will be coming shortly.
Thank you for that answer. And then I have another question before I turn it over to the other members, and that's regarding the fiscal impact. So, we have a fiscal note generated from Washoe County and Clark County. Washoe, 1.3 million, Clark, 2.8 million in the biennium. What will the fiscal impact, do you believe, be by adding the rurals into this?
Thank you. Mandy Davis for the record. We estimate that approximately 300,000 would be realized for the rural child welfare programs each biennium if the bill were to pass in with the proposed amendment included.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so with that, any of the committee members have any questions for the bill presenter or for the team here today? I see Senator Kiefer. Go right ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. So I just want to make sure I understand. So the title, so the 2015 bill allowed title funds to offset general funds. Is that right? And then the money that we save, we're supposed to be reinvesting. I mean, did I understand that correctly?
Mandy Davis for the record. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So with the formula in the U.S. code outlining, as you indicated, the various things it has to be used on, why would we want to have the bill say that the funds can be used for any purpose? Any purpose related to child welfare.
Mm-hmm. Mandy Davis for the record. Currently, the federal law states that services may be used for programs that are funded under existing Title 4B and 4E programs without a lot of restriction. There is a minimum percentage that must be reinvested in post-adoption services. So the remaining 70% is fairly flexible in how we can expend it. It just needs to meet the federal requirements for existing foster care systems. But the 30% is the part that needs to be specifically reinvested.
Is there anything that puts a timeline on the reinvestment component of the federal law? I mean, does it say if we reinvest it for 1 year and it doesn't get used, then we get to rake it back? It's a weird mechanism. I can't think of another mechanism where you can carry forward for 1 year and then it reverts.
Thank you, Mandy Davis for the record. The federal law does not require the reinvestment to occur within a specific time frame. It's open. It specifically says the reinvestment expenses do not have to be expended in the same year that the savings were realized. The bill, as it was written, states that any savings that are balanced forward to 1 year must be expended in that second year. Otherwise, then they revert back to the general fund. So the state law would be more stringent as far as when those reinvestment funds must be expended, whereas the federal law is a little bit more flexible as far as the timeline that those funds must be expended.
And then I guess my final question, Mr. Chairman, is just from an accounting perspective at the family services level, they're going to have to, are you going to require them to segregate these funds that are carried forward and make sure that they are being spent, in accordance with the rules, but also within the timeline so that they revert if they aren't allocated?
Mandy Davis for the record. We would anticipate that those funds would fall into a special use category to ensure that those are segregated from the remaining general funds that the child welfare jurisdictions receive, and ensure that they're expended in accordance with the federal law so that we can report back to the feds that we were able to expend them according to the requirements for reinvestment. So they would be segregated. Any funds that aren't able to be fully expended in that second year would then revert back to the general fund.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kiefer. Any other committee members have any questions? I do not see any. I have another question, however, that inspired by the Senator Kiefer's line of questioning. So if there's a federal requirement that there's a certain percent that's reinvested in a certain types of activities, even with our current structure and it reverted, could you then make a budget in building your budget? Could you submit line item requests for that particular amount of money and for those particular activities, and then would that qualify? Would that meet the requirements of the federal government?
Thank you, Mandy Davis, for the record. We can, as far as our budget building and coding that occurs in our budget, we can segregate the costs from the 70% that is more generalized, separated from the 30% that is more specific for post-adoption activities. We can do that either in separate GLs or with some coding that occurs with those expenses, so that we have to meet the federal requirements to report those back to the Fed. So we would be tracking those internally as well and have some type of coding requirements to be able to report those on our federal reporting requirements.
From a timing standpoint, would that meet the requirements from the federal government? So you have money that's left over, it reverts, you build your next budget, you identify the reverted amount, you segregate those funds for the activities required by the feds, and you make a budget request based upon that. Would that qualify and satisfy the federal government's requirements?
Mandy Davis, for the record, I'll try to answer, and if I'm not getting to the point of your question, please let me know. We can, in our future budget years, we can include a projected amount that would be balanced forward. But with the passage of the bill as it's written, we would have to demonstrate that the actual amount that's calculated was determined based on the adoptions that occurred in that year. So our budget can include projections. It would have to be trued up, though, whenever those years closed and the balance forward amount was determined.
And I'm really talking about the current situation as it currently exists, not if this bill were to pass. Like, is that something that's possible?
Mandy Davis, for the record, it could be possible. The bill as it's currently proposed would allow that to occur at closing. So when we close our current budget, that would be the time where we would balance forward any funds that were calculated as savings in that year. The bill has an effective date of July 1st. So I don't anticipate that we'd be able to make that balance forward happen until the end of fiscal year 22, balance forward into fiscal year 23. So the current fiscal year that we're in, I don't think would apply based on the effective date for this bill.
Thank you, Senator Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to clarify, so the fiscal note indicates a $2 million impact for fiscal year 23. Round that up to what, 2.35 million if we include rurals. And so it's not an additional general fund appropriation, but that would be the reversion that we would otherwise book in September or something like that won't be coming back to the general fund, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct. Mandy Davis, for the record. It would not be funded with new general fund appropriations. It would be funded with remaining balance forwards from fiscal year 22.
Right. So on our balance sheets, it impacts the ending fund balance projected that carries forward.
Correct.
Chair, I have a question.
Senator Ratty, I see you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So, and is that something, that dollar amount or that scale of a dollar amount that we would anticipate would only happen once? Because then we would be in a flow of doing this every biennium. And so you have to sort of swallow that pain the first time, but each subsequent biennium, because we would already be doing these, because we would be in the habit of doing these reversions. I know the dollar amount would vary, but would we see a similar scale? I don't know if I phrased that correctly, but really trying to understand, is this more pain upfront to get to a new system?
Mandy Davis for the record, this would be an ongoing requirement. I believe the federal law requires states to reinvest those funds up until federal fiscal year 25. So it would be remaining funds realized in one fiscal year would be balanced forward to the next fiscal year. It would not be a new influx of general funds every year.
And Ross Armstrong, I think, Senator, some of your question was, we've not done this, and so there's this about $4 million kind of in the hole concept. This bill doesn't take care of any of that. It just simply essentially stops the bleeding on increasing the potential that the feds could come and enforce on. So that would be that the number that is in the fiscal note is an average of multiple years to try to give the best guess about what that number might be. But we're not taking care of the already the years in the past in terms of getting out of that hole.
But there would be a similar ending fund balance hit in each subsequent biennium.
Correct.
Right, thank you.
Do any other of the committee members have any questions? So you have, this bill has the honor of being the only bill on the agenda today, which allows my curiosity to run wild and ask you a bunch more questions. And so I'm having I'm struggling a little bit with why. I can see why this would be helpful. I just don't see why it's necessary. So if you currently, and pretend like the bill does not exist, I want to talk about your situation as it currently exists. If the requirement is that 30% of the savings associated with at the end of the budget have to go to a certain activity, why couldn't we continue with the scenario that we currently have, not what's being proposed in this bill, and then when you make a budget request as you're building your future budget, you segregate, you as we discussed, you put that 30% into, you code it or line item it specific for an activity, and you build that into your budget request moving forward. Now, obviously, there's always the opportunity for the legislature not to, or it not to make the GovRec budget, or the legislature not to see it or approve it. But wouldn't that comply with the law? Like currently, like I realize this is more convenient and efficient, and that it skips the step of having to deal with the Nevada legislature. But like, wouldn't that scenario comply with the law?
Mandy Davis for the record. I think it would, if we were to have a separate enhancement unit or decision unit in our budget that has the estimated amount of savings that we would realize in that year. I think the issue that could possibly occur is that the savings that are realized in one fiscal year are based on the number of children who are adopted at a certain age. And at the end of the year, we calculate those savings. So we would, the reinvestment would be occurring at the same time as the savings were being realized. So we would have some requirements to true up on our end at the end of a fiscal year to make sure that the savings and the reinvestment were aligned and reported correctly to our federal partners. I think it's possible. There's also the risk that the savings would be more than what was allocated in the budget. So we would either have to come back to IFC or roll over that reinvestment requirement to a future year.
Thank you. That was helpful. It's kind of a timing issue, right? So it's actuals that roll over, and you just use it based on that, as opposed to projections and then building based on projections, all based on timing. Okay, that was incredibly helpful. Thank you. Do any other committee members have any questions? Senator Kiefer? And then, Senator Gokachia. Well, Senator Gokachia, why don't you go ahead first, and then we'll follow up with Senator Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm just trying to get a feel for it. But all right, if in fact we bring this bill forward, then technically, could you not end up in a scenario where these agencies did in fact had some carryover money? It would be in their budget, and then so down the road you'd end up they would have a harder time actually applying and getting a grant from the federal side?
Mandy Davis for the record. This is currently in our federal funding requirements, is this reinvestment requirement. So we wouldn't have to apply for any new funding. The federal government just requires states to reinvest any savings they're able to realize. So it wouldn't require any new grants at the federal level. As far as issuing funds to nonprofits, as Ms. Rowe is involved in, or other community-based agencies, we would have to ensure that those agencies are able to fully expend those funds on allowable activities within that second fiscal year, to ensure that those funds wouldn't revert back at the end and further our liability for reinvestments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Garcia. Senator Kiefer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is just a question based on my own lack of knowledge. Maintenance of effort requirement in this for this category, is there one, and does this affect it? So.
Mandy Davis for the record. I think the maintenance of effort on this one goes back to the amount of state funds that the state contributed to its foster care programs back in 2007. So that was quite a while ago. There is a maintenance of effort requirement, but I don't anticipate that we would ever fall below that, just based on our growth that's occurred since then.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Any other questions from any committee members? So I do not see any further questions from any committee members, and we've had the opportunity to ask some questions and get some answers, as well as do your presentation. So at this point, I think I will go to the phones and look for testimony in support of Senate Bill 377.
Thank you, Chair Brooks. To testify in support on Senate Bill 377, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 377. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good morning. My name is Deshaun Jackson, DASHUN JACKSON. Good morning, Committee Chair, Vice Chair, and Committee members. I serve as the Director of Children's Safety and Welfare Policy with the Children's Advocacy Alliance. And the Alliance stands in support of Senate Bill 377. We believe this bill is essential to ensuring these programs are getting the financial support that they need. By reinvesting the dollars, we believe that the children and families will benefit from the funds being reinvested into the different programs. And we also believe that it is essential to the continuous efforts in ensuring that all youth and families are supported. Thank you so much, Committee, Chair, and members.
Caller with the last three digits, 878. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Justin Jones, JUSTINJONES. Thank you, Chair Brooks and members of the committee. I currently serve on the Clark County Commission and am testifying here today on behalf of Clark County. I also currently serve as chair of the Department of Family Services DJJS Policy and Fiscal Affairs Committee, along with members of the judiciary, which considers fiscal affairs issues such as those involved in SB 377. Clark County has the largest child welfare and foster care programs in the state, and child welfare is of utmost importance to Clark County. SB 377 would provide critical funding for child welfare programs and help provide homes for needy children while bringing us into further compliance with federal law. WK recruiters have been great partners with Clark County, and as Ms. Rowe testified, these programs have been successful in adoptive placements for the most challenging kids in our foster care system. SB 377 would further help support such programs. And on a personal note, my wife and I have had the opportunity to adopt 2 amazing children. SB 377 will help ensure that more families like mine will have that same opportunity. Accordingly, I would ask for your support for SB 377. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working, and there are no additional callers at this time.
Thank you. Could we see if we have any callers on the line in opposition to Senate Bill 377?
Thank you so much, Chair. To testify in opposition on Senate Bill 377, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Can we see if we have any callers in the neutral position to this bill?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Senate Bill 377, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you. So, excuse me. With that, I'd like to give Senator Orenshaw any closing remarks he would like to make before we close the hearing on this bill.
Chair Brooks, members of the committee, thank you for hearing Senate Bill 377. I want to thank Administrator Ross Armstrong and Deputy Administrator Davis. I appreciate all the thoughtful questions and all the information provided by our colleagues at the state. I do believe that this bill will try to help, that there are more funds to try to help with these adoption programs. And I'm certainly open to any amendments that Chair of the committee think might make it a better bill. But I do hope the committee will consider processing it. And thank you for hearing it this morning.
Thank you, Senator. And with that, I want to close the hearing on Senate Bill 377 and move to our final agenda item, which is public comment and broadcast services. Will you please see if we have anyone on the line to make public comment? And we'll give them about a minute in case they waited to sign in.
Thank you, Chair. Currently, there are no callers for public comment at this time. Broadcast standing by to give public comment. Please call in and press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much. Well, with that, our final agenda item being taken care of, we can that brings us to the end of the meeting. And thank you, members and staff. And I hope you had a wonderful Easter. And that is it for today. And we can adjourn.